Yes, this is my most epic project yet. Hi, I'm Dan. Welcome back to Therapy Woodworks, the funky little wood shop where we make stuff usually made of wood and have some laughs along the way. This week's video is a continuation of my most epic wet bar build where I pieced together the outer cabinet. In this video, you'll see me grunt a little, sweat a little, and throw things while I swear. The first step to creating usable panels from this 4/4 live edge black walnut was to rip an edge, thus removing one of the live edges. I've not bucked up to purchase a several $100 track saw yet, but I did invest in a $100 Craig straight edge guide. So with my worm drive saw, I managed to cut an impressively straight edge. Next, I cross-cut the boards to rough length. This is deviating from normal sequencing for milling operations, but that is me. I'm a deviant, dancing to the beat of a different drummer yet again. I could then take the boards and run them over the jointer to true up that edge I had just cut with my imitation track saw. My 8-inch spiral head jointer sure was a great investment. On the table saw, I could use the edge that I just trued up on the jointer against the fence to create parallel edges. I cut those boards to varying widths because they will be glued up to form 6 side panels required for the 3 cabinet boxes. Once glued up, the 6 panels will be trimmed to a final width. I should mention now that these boards come from Waite Woodworking in Prince George, and they were dried and flattened prior to purchase. This is the primary reason I do not have to flatten a face on the jointer as we normally do. As we know, the wood is always moving, especially as it is exposed to differing climatic conditions, primarily the humidity. Unfortunately, some of these boards did develop a very slight cupping after they were dimensioned, and since they were wider than my 8-inch jointer, I gave them a light pass through the planer with the cupped side down. This is definitely not a method I would recommend, but in this case, it tuned them up perfectly. I now have enough flat and square material to glue up the 6 side panels in the 3 cabinet boxes. I meticulously selected and match up boards to meet the minimum width requirements. I considered grain structure and characteristics as well as just plain beauty when mating the boards. Some of the boards will not be very visible at the end of the day, so it allowed for the selection of the best boards for the most visible bits. Although the Domino Joinery is not required for the strength of the joint, I do need to maintain very accurate alignment of these panels as they will not be planed after gluing. While I complete the tedious task of gluing up 6 side panels, I'd like to take the opportunity to thank those viewers that have been with me through this 5-year YouTube journey. If this is your first time to my channel, I would encourage you to subscribe. It's an easy thing to do and it means so much to us creators. Through the support of my subscribers, I've been monetized for a year now, and YouTube is currently buying me a small bottle of whiskey every month. Just what every retired paramedic needs. I now have 6 glued up panels all lined up and ready to be machined to perfection. Now here comes the nerve-wracking task of machining all of the hardwood panels to precise and matching lengths and widths. First, make sure the fence is precisely square to the blade. This is also the point where it becomes important to think like a furniture maker and a cabinet builder at the same time. The front section of the cabinet has a 45-degree miter that will be domino jointed and extremely visible. The back section will not be seen and will be mostly glued and screwed together for added strength, as it will bear most of the stress once the unit is screwed to the wall. I had to create an intricate setup on the slider table that took into consideration the fact that this cut must be repeatable as well as prevent the possibility of tear out. A 45-degree stop block attached to the fence made sure that each panel was in the same location for each cut. Cutting the panels to the required width was a straightforward task and there was no complicating angles. Simply square edges that are easily repeated with the standard stop block on a miter fence. That's it for the end panels of the cabinet boxes. These cutoffs will come in handy during glue up of those mitered corners. You'll see how in just a bit. There is, however, 2 more tricky panels. The front top sections of the outermost cabinet boxes are very visible and need some precision miters cut in them as well. The biggest concern is eliminating any chance of tear out. I accomplish this by clamping a square backer board between the fence and the panel to protect that rear edge as it leaves the saw blade. Time to put on my cabinet maker's hat and start drilling pocket holes on some 3/4 inch plywood. I'm using plywood in the rear part of the cabinet, which will never be seen. I'd much rather spend $100 on a good sheet of plywood as opposed to the $640 it would cost for a similar amount of walnut. I'm not much of a fan of pocket holes for the mere fact that when you go to drill the screws, it's a crapshoot as to how much the panel will move and how out of square the project ends up. I tend to go overboard with the support of the panels I am joining, using these square gluing blocks as a means to hold the panel together while screwing. I also glue on these joints, which some makers believe is completely redundant. But like I say, I tend to go overboard, and I know how much weight those panels will be supporting. Here we go with a not so crappy shoot. Perfect alignment every time. Now I have many plywood stretchers. It is about this time that I got to worrying about all that weight being supported by these plywood stretchers. I thought that maybe a French cleat system would help with that weight issue. I had one problem. I did not cut a 45-degree angle in the stretchers, and since my table saw currently had a dado stack on it, I figured I would try out the Craig straight edge guide again. This was a mistake. Now, I love my worm drive skill saw for carpentry. I believe it is the best tool that a skill company makes in their lineup of not so great DIY tools. But this is not a great tool for cabinet making. No finesse, dust control, no cord management, and this led to a disaster that left me cursing. Wait for the outtakes at the end of the video for the evidence of my frustration. Well, that wasn't the greatest idea I ever came up with. I shortly thereafter went to my computer and ordered myself a Craig track saw system. As I've mentioned, all of the hardwood that will be visible from the front of the cabinet will be miter jointed with Domino Joinery to reinforce and align the end grain glue joints. I first marked the panels to line up the Festool cutter. For this application, I will only cut the narrow slots as opposed to making one of the mating holes wider. This will add some strength to the joint, but also means that I have to be pretty precise when cutting the holes or risk poor alignment. I now have a bunch of machine panels all ready to be glued and screwed together to make 3 separate cabinet boxes. First, I will dry fit everything. And also add those triangular shaped cutoffs to aid with applying clamps during the glue up. A little blue tape, CA glue, and accelerator will do the trick just fine. Time to start throwing some glue and screws at these 18 components to form them into 3 boxes. Each box consists of 2 walnut end panels, 2 walnut front stretchers, and 2 plywood rear stretcher components. Just in case you haven't quite got the big picture yet, the hardwood joinery is completed with dominoes. Here I am joining the right end panel and the long lower front stretcher. It is important to get this joint just right as it is highly visible in the finished cabinet. Using a copious amount of glue and a good cleanup is vital to creating a strong and clean joint. The angled cutoffs are now coming into use as a good clamping surface. A few love taps with the mallet will completely close up the gaps while under pressure from the clamps. Making sure I still have all the correct panels, I will then join the left end panel and the upper front stretcher just as I did with the other end panel. Again, a little gentle persuasion with the mallet, lots of glue, and this L-shaped piece will come together just as it did during my dry fit. My trusty mallet sure has been a great tool. It has an interesting history that you can learn about in one of my previous videos from my library of vids. I'll leave a link. Another tactic I use in gluing up these panels is to incorporate right angle clamps that will ensure the panels align at 90 degrees. A pretty tidy glue up of the two mating panels, if I do say so myself. I let the glue set for 24 hours and came back the next day for the awkward task of joining two panels together. I really needed two of me to accomplish this, but seeing as I do not have an evil twin nor quite figured out how to clone myself, I carried on. I would have asked my wife to help, but she was locked me in the shop again before she went off to work. She just wants to keep me from hanging out at the A&W with the rest of the retired vagrants. It's a good thing she goes to work. Who else is going to support my money pit of a wood studio? And here we have it, the beautiful front half of a very lovely box. With a lot of glue and many screws into pre-drilled and countersunk holes, I attached the upper and lower rear plywood stretchers. Very important at this point to get that right. I'm no engineer, but I realize that these 4 joints are going to see a significant amount of stress when the heavy drawers and 50 pounds of alcaboos are in them, and fully extended 30 inches of weighted leverage will be applied. I'm glad Invisible Dan was there to help along the way. Turns out he's not much help, just hung out drinking my beer and playing video games. At this point, I have 3 cabinet boxes created. But because my design had the 2 outer boxes on a lower level than the middle one, I decided to create a unique transition piece incorporating a wine rack. Because I wanted these transitions mirrored identically, I utilized an MDF template. I marked out the hole locations on the walnut first, transferred them to the template, and used a hole saw to complete the initial cut. The oscillating drum sander helped to clean up the edges. I used my plunge router along with a router bushing to follow along the template. I made the final cut in the walnut faceplate in 4 passes. This was a new technique for me, and I was also very pleased with the outcome. I think I might be hooked on template guides now. At this point, you're going to actually have to trust that I completed the build on this transition pieces. It seems that my COVID brain kicked in for a couple of days and I forgot to press record on the cameras. But it was fun. There were some through dados utilizing the flesh-eating dado blades on the table saw. Oh well. I had to step back to the cabinet boxes as I decided that a chamfer would add a unique detail to the cabinet. The chamfer was going to be applied to the internal edge of the cabinet boxes, not the typical external edge. My idea was that the drawers could be recessed inside the cabinet front edge, giving it a more complex architectural design. To accomplish this task, I set up an interesting stabilizer on my trim router, which drastically improved the stability of the final cut. I was pleased with the outcome and couldn't wait to see the inset drawer fronts. I was a little disappointed with the mess I had to clean up, though. No dust extraction. The final touch was to hand carve the inside corners of the chamfer, as the router could not cut this corner completely. So a bit of a momentous day in this floating bar cabinet project. I've been off on another project for 3 weeks. It was an epoxy river table. Put a link somewhere in the comments so you can see what I've been doing for the last 3 weeks. So I'm a little bit behind on this project, which is okay, to be expected. Today I got the first coat of Osmo on most of the cabinetry. I know this is just a sealer coat, so to seal all the inners, and a primary coat on the exterior parts. I'm going to put a second coat on after it's all assembled, but it means that tomorrow I get to assemble it, which is a huge step forward. The assembly of the 3 cabinet boxes and 2 transitions was fairly straightforward, as every component is screwed together in cabinet making style. No fancy joinery, no glue involved at all. However, there was a significant amount of detailed attention given to precise comparative measurement. The use of vernier calipers allowed me to maintain tolerances to the fraction of a millimeter. The components were held in position with clamps while I pre-drilled, countersunk, and screwed the parts into final position. This will provide enough strength as the entire assembly will be screwed to the wall, adding significant overall strength. Here we are with the 2 components joined. Now let's add the remaining 3. Well, here I am Again, I just got rid of a 10-foot project, and now I've got a 7-foot project, soon to be 9-foot project that I've got to try and manipulate without dropping. And this one's much heavier. Uh-oh. Well, this ain't working. Hang on. This way. That's better. Oh. Holy shit. Oops, sorry, I swore. Holy crap. Walnut is significantly heavier than cedar. That's for sure. Oh, get it from his end. Oh, holy peckerdoodles. With a lot more fine measurements with the caliper and a bunch more drilling and screwing, I had all of the 5 sections assembled. It was really starting to come together.
I got a ticket in my hand to you, canceling all my plans.
I couldn't wait to see the drawer fronts in the cabinet, so I had to trim them to final size and take a sneak peek at what it would look like.
Got a ticket in my hand to you, 'cause I'm thinking maybe we got something.
I decided again to change a component in the last minute. I added a filler to separate the top from the cabinet to give the top a floating characteristic. This turned out to be the best last-minute detail I could have ever imagined. This added another dynamic to the overall architectural design of the piece.
Something good, something good.
Well, that's it for the cabinet build component of this most epic wet bar build. Go to the Therapy Woodworks channel and you can see the rest of the components being built and an overview of the complete wet bar build. My wife should be home any minute to let me out of the cage, so we'll see you on the next video. Thanks for tuning in. Time to go get a wet.
Yeah, I'm thinking maybe we got something.
Nooks and crannies are more tedious than I thought they would be. For the love of Pete. Rehearse this shit, the chord still gets hung up. Jesus Christ. Oh shit. Me. I hate chords. That's all, folks.